everyone. My name is Evie Lupine. Welcome back to the channel. And today we are continuing our interview series, but we're not doing this with KinkFest. We are just interviewing some lovely people in the community. And today we're going to be speaking with Madame Posh around being a member of the BDSM community and also being a professional Dom. So would you like to introduce yourself to the audience and give everybody a little bit of background about what you do and how you got started in kink?
Yes, well, hello everyone. My name is Madame Posh, and yes, I am a pro dom in Texas, and I also have a kink educational channel on YouTube called the MP Experience that I just started recently. I have been kinky for about 4 years. I have been active in the community just about a year now. Yeah, actually, yeah, a year this month. And I have been seeing clients for about 6 months, 6 or 7 months. I also have just started leading a couple of groups in my community, and I work at the dungeon part-time on the weekends.
That's great. Yeah, it sounds like you've been really involved with the community. And from what it sounds like as well, you actually started out participating in the community as a member before you branched out into offering professional services.
I had done tons of research, including binge watching everything on your channel. I had gotten to the point of my research, and I had been in a few dynamics on the S side of the slash because I am a switch, just not very often, rarely anymore. The only thing that I was kind of missing was actually seeing people play. And so it's like I knew a lot of the technical things, and I had been, practicing flogging and spanking and where to spank and, the basic things when you're first getting into kink, but I hadn't actually seen scenes. And I also had a big desire to be active in the community. So I started going to events, and I started going to a lot of events, and I would, try to go be at the dungeon whenever it would be open, because most of the events I went to were like conventions or whatever, so I could actually see people play. And once I started doing that, then that kind of opened the floodgate of my creativity, and then I started reaching out to some, I started meeting people and reaching out to more specific people for learning things and kind of some mentorship kinds of things. And then natural have wanted to be my own boss for my entire life. Instinct kind of kicked in.
So it sounds like you kind of got more started being a professional so you could work for yourself, or was that kind of something that just came about naturally as part of your progression being a member of the community?
As I became a member of the community and kind of learned more about what kink is, and also just lots of discovering who I am, everything kind of lined up with all the things that I'm passionate about in life, and it just kind of added up into that's exactly what you should be doing. It's a mix of my project management and event planning skills that I've used in the past, and jobs that I really enjoy doing. It's a mix of the cosplay and the fantasy and the role play that I love. I clearly am very passionate about kink, so I get to do, that aspect of it. And then my entrepreneur, I get to run my own business. I'm in control of everything. I can say no or say yes to this. It just kind of, all the blocks just kind of fell in place, to be honest. And then I just kind of started, I researched probably for a month, just a Dom site after pro Dom site, whether they were, in Europe or in the States, all the ones that work in Dallas where I live.
So, sort of the whole theme I want to have around this conversation, in case people listening aren't fully aware, is talking about the intersections of being a person who works professionally in the world of BDSM, i.e., being a professional dominant, versus being a community member and where those two things intersect. Because, at least for me, a lot of my exposure to people who work professionally in BDSM or use BDSM as part of their sex work, for example, it tends to be people who aren't otherwise involved in the community. And I think sometimes that can perhaps give people an unrealistic impression of what BDSM is really like, or people worry about it not respecting, the boundaries of what we would consider to be risk-aware kink or safe, sane, and consensual kink. And I'd really like to get more of an inside perspective on kind of what's really going on there. Of course, I don't expect anybody to be like the spokesperson for all people who are, or one thing or another, be that all people who are littles or all people who are professional dominants or anything like that. But kind of getting a little bit more of a realistic sense, especially because you were a community member first and the professional side of things kind of came into it later. So I would love to hear, what is your typical experience like doing something in the community versus doing something in a professional setting? Is it like a very different headspace, or more like maybe two aspects of the same thing?
It's something that I did without kind of realizing it. So I have two steady weekly clients, and then I have like a couple other monthly when they can fit it into their schedule clients. All of them have are kinky with their partners. Most of the time have a more private kinky social group. They don't really participate in the community. And then one of them is actually I'm in a relationship with, and he's my submissive. And so there is a lot of I have a lot of overlap between my both roles. I wouldn't say that there's really a difference in how I take on either aspect, whether I'm pro-doming or in the community. And I think that's one thing that's kind of set me apart from other pro-doms. If you read on my website, I kind of was very intentional about differentiating my services from maybe typical vanilla stereotypes of what a dominatrix is. So you're not going to go to my site and see just me angry. And I am not saying anything negative about this look. I love it. It is hot. I follow these dominatrixes on Instagram, but you're not going to see me just kind of looking down and being like, you're a dog or a peasant, or typically, again, kind of just stereotypically would be associated with being a femdom or a prodom. My site's a little bit more about some, I say nurturing, but it's not necessarily from a mothering aspect. It's that I want to push people to grow personally, spiritually, emotionally within kink, push those boundaries as well, to grow as a person, to kind of develop a more valuable and fulfilled life. And I kind of look at as more like life coaching with a BDSM aspect. One of my clients recently, that's something we've just started negotiating, expanding on our dynamic, is having a little bit more control over certain things in his life outside of just our sessions. And that was definitely the target kind of market, I guess you would say, from a business aspect. When I was planning on doing pro work, I didn't start it because I needed this to be my main source of income. It was more like there are people who maybe won't go out into the community, or maybe don't have the time to put that into the community, who still need that kind of human connection that kink and BDSM provides. And so it's more of a give back that helps me be able to sustain myself, I guess, if that makes sense. I was very intentional about kind of wording my website and how I did my, just pictures on it and things like that, to kind of show that it's not just about degradation, to be honest. And that is a huge aspect in the femdom universe, is constant degradation. And like with my submissive, I call him my gentleman, and I understand that that is not traditional kink culture to have a gentleman who is your sub. I've had to explain this to many different leather people and older people in the community, why it is that way, but that is what I call him. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that degradation is not part of our dynamic. So to use something like boy is degrading, and that's a hard limit. So that's not a focus of our relationship.
It's less about having like an alter ego, because I know people who are professional who they're submissive in their everyday kink life, but then they are a dominatrix or a pro dom or a femdom as part of their work, and it's two very 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 separate spheres, two very different attitudes, and it sounds like it's more of a natural extension of what you do, just done in a professional capacity, which I think is really unique and interesting, because I think the stereotype can kind of go that like, oh, people who do this professionally aren't really in the community, and it's actually damaging to the community because they're, basically fulfilling porn fantasies in real life, and that just kind of perpetuates issues that people have about perceiving BDSM as it really is for like normal everyday people. And while I'm certainly not saying there's anything necessarily wrong with having people as service providers
Yeah.
meet the needs of their clients, if that's what they negotiate and that's what everybody consents to doing. But that's kind of the stereotype that's associated with professional services in the community, at least where I live, is that, oh, they just are doing it for money. They don't really care about being good representatives or anything. They just, they see people who have like fetishes and they just want to exploit them for a bunch of money and make a quick buck and not really kind of form any lasting connection. And that actually brings me into the next question I had for you, because based on your description, it sounds like the majority of people you work with, the people you've had the most experience with, go into like longer time client relationships as opposed to just like, one time, that's it, and then, they may or may not ever come back. How do you separate like a professional relationship from a personal one, or is there anything that's kind of separate about that?
Again, that was very intentional. Again, from the beginning of launching my website and doing pro work, it was that I wanted to create long-term clients that I create dynamics with. I don't want, and again, there's nothing negative about this. This is just picking my demographic, right? But yeah, if you just need a beating, I'm probably not your dom. Most of my clients do a yes no checklist, and we create those boundaries and hard limits, and then I'm allowed to play wherever within those, however I decide. So there still is a power exchange. I do have a service offering where if you say you would like this scene with me wearing this and you want me to say this and you're going to wear this and you need this exact, background or whatever else, and I do offer those services, but there's no power exchange there for me. So it's really just me, again, yeah, fulfilling a fantasy or playing a role. And so I charge more for those. I have two different like price offerings with that. And then as far as separating my personal relationship, I've found that because I'm taking my business in the way where I'm trying to create dynamics, the submissives don't look at it as much transactional. It's really looked at as tribute. One of my clients has said, look, I'm not paying you for a service. I'm offering you tribute for the time and the money that you've spent learning rope or learning how to create this dynamic or making sure that you're safe or going to all these events and paying for your website or whatever else, like all of the things that I have to do to be able to provide this experience for him. He looks at it as like, I'm just helping you continue to be able to do that. He's like, it's somewhat even selfish, right? I'm doing this to benefit me, but it helps you. And so again, I think it's then with my gentleman who, we have a DS dynamic, we're in a romantic relationship, and he's also a client. But again, I almost don't even want like put client on there anymore. It's more looked at as tribute for our dynamic, if that makes sense.
That does make sense. I think that's really interesting, actually, to kind of have that transition, because it sounds like it's at least for this relationship, it sounds like it's a very natural sort of like, it's not just me paying you for a service and it's purely transactional, but now there's this aspect of it that is a tribute to the power exchange and to you. And I did want to ask you a little bit about financial domination, because that tends to be a pretty hot button issue. Is this something where it maybe goes into aspects of financial domination, or is it just really going back to like, this is how we originally set up the relationship? Because I think, at least in my mind, I would typically differentiate between paying for a transaction, between a professional service and a client versus having a level of financial control in a relationship.
I have not negotiated financial control in any of my dynamics. Now, he is my gentleman and he acts like a gentleman and treats me like a lady. So, does he pay for things when we go out? Yes. Does he buy me gifts? Yes. I think that's part of, again, that's part of the DS dynamic and tribute. Anyways, yes. I do think that one of my other clients, he's kind of requested a little bit more domination in that aspect. And I want to preface this with, in my past careers, I was an entertainer of the evening, and I was really bad at it because it requires that you ask people for money and for just being attractive. And my friends used to joke at me, make fun of me that I could never have a sugar daddy because I'm not good at being a sugar baby. And it's true. And part of that's because I'm not good at playing a submissive role in that dynamic anyways. But I struggle with that. I need people to more to offer those things than I'm going to demand or request those things. So I could never. I don't think that it's within my personality to be a FemDom, FIN, and I don't. I don't judge anyone for anything that they do. I know on one of your live streams you had mentioned that you don't care for when people take advantage of a fetish, and I think if you don't understand it, yeah, and if you are making fun of it and taking advantage of the people who have it, then that's unhealthy and just a horrible thing to do. And again, that's why I've tried to build my pro-dom stuff the way it is that we're trying to grow as both of us as people. My submissives and clients have helped me grow more than anything.
One of the reasons why I wanted to have this conversation was because of that live stream, and for people who maybe don't know what I'm talking about, because I don't expect that even most people who follow my channel even watch every live stream. But a couple of weeks ago, there was this very interesting video that popped up on the trending feed in YouTube, both with my just general YouTube account and my channel account, like the one that I used to upload videos with. And in both of them, it kept suggesting this video of how to make money selling pictures of your feet. And it was this whole video about this girl who is not personally kinky, not personally into feet whatsoever, basically like a guide on how to have people give you money for pictures of your feet. Not trying to shame the hustle, not trying to do anything like that, but it did kind of bring up those feelings of like, well, is it really like ethical to exploit people for large sums of money for like what you see as like easy money for an easy job? And I'm doing air quotes because people can't see that over audio, but I think there's sometimes kind of misconceptions around the like, oh, being a pro dom is like easy work for like so much money, and as long as you're willing to do it, you can make money doing things that are really like simple, like just kind of like exploiting people's fetishes, which you've already touched on. And I would love to talk about ethical pro doming and like what that looks like, and maybe how to be thoughtful with it for people who are listening who are maybe interested in either obtaining those services or in maybe looking into something like that for themselves. But I'd also like to talk about the personal growth aspect of being a pro dom, and that kind of sounds like that's what you get out of it, maybe a little bit. Not to make any assumptions for you, but I think going back to it, I think a lot of people think, oh, of course people want to be a pro dom if they have the skill set because you make so much money. But it sounds like for you, it goes beyond that, and it's about kind of having that personal growth and personal connection. Is there anything else that kind of motivates you to want to engage in being a pro dom?
Yeah, so the personal growth again, and I've only been offering service again for about 6 months, but I'm not getting wealthy I'm surviving and I'm able to support what I'm trying to do in my life right now. But again, it never was really about the money. It's always kind of been about, I want to be able to be 24/7. I don't want to have to go to a vanilla job and flip those masks all the time. I've had to play masquerade with masks for my entire life constantly. And I wanted to live in a space where this is who I am all the time and I can be it all the time on any social media. I don't have to have separate accounts. Like, this is what it is. I've always kind of had a connection to helping people and spiritual healing and connecting with people, and I'm the friend in the group people go to with their problems and for advice. And even though most of the time they don't listen or they don't like what it is, that's kind of always how I've been looked at. I mean, even when I used to just go out and party with friends at the end of the night, I'm the one that's collected and collecting all of my friends together so we get home safely. And so, you know careers I was drawn to, before kink, were life coaching and, event planning in a way where you're, building an event with a person that's meaningful for them and making that a once in a lifetime experience. And so, again, I had things that were kind of driving me towards this aspect already in vanilla world before I knew I was even kinky, as well as my own personal growth. Like, the watching my submissives or clients grow, that feeds my soul, if that makes sense. Like, the reason, why I've kind of been in those roles where my friends come to me for those things is that I enjoy that. And when I see people grow and, even in my community, as new people are coming in and I see them from week one going from awkward and not really wanting to talk to anyone. And then, a month later, they're coming out to 3 events a week. And then 2 months later, they've like tied their first person. And I'm on the side with two like pom poms, just like, go you, yay, this is so much fun. And I've even started kind of, I think I've called it a contact high or a contact space, where I kind of get into a top sub, whatever that kind of space is, when we're floaty, just from being around other people who are experiencing new kinky experiences. So I would say that's probably something that definitely drives my dominance and my pro dom work and my passion to share knowledge within the community.
To clarify, I know earlier you said this is not in like a motherly way. It's more of like a personal coach type of feeling, or even kind of just like, I guess the closest thing I can maybe think to compare it to would be compersion. Like, you get happy off of other people's happiness, basically.
Yes.
Yeah. And I think that's maybe a little bit counterintuitive for people who are like, but you're causing the person pain. But like, it's this weird cycle of sadomasochism where it's like, but the masochist is happy that I'm hurting them, and as a sadist, I'm happy that they're happy that I've hurt them, and so on and so forth.
Well, and that's actually a really interesting topic to this interview that I'm posting in stages on my channel. We talked about it's with someone who's very, very sadistic, and we talked about how, if the bottom is not enjoying that sadism in a pleasure way, we don't get anything out of it. So even like if we were in like an MS dynamic and you want to make your slave do something they maybe don't want to do, and it's going to inflict pain, like, he doesn't do that with his slave because that does nothing for him, if that makes sense, right? And I felt very similar. Like, I like inflicting pain and doing sadistic things if they're receiving pleasure from it. And when it gets beyond the point where they're just doing it for me and there is no pleasure there, then it's not as enjoyable, if that makes sense.
I think maybe that was a good time to go back to that prime question, which is, how can you do being a professional dominant in an ethical way? Is there anything that you sort of learned about that, or any observations you've made about how to do that successfully?
Yeah, so personally, I don't offer services and fetishes that I don't also enjoy. So I will use pegging as an example, because I have passionate feelings about it. I get asked about this service often, and many pro doms offer it. I do not. I think that pegging is a very personal and intimate experience that I would like to share with someone I'm in a dynamic with, not a transactional one. Also, my inner feminist struggles with the fact that even though it's still within the realm of sex work, because we are, because unfortunately we live in that's the way America is, it's more accepted than like the other way around, right? Like if the roles were reversed. And so I struggle with that aspect, taking money for that service. So for me, keeping things ethical and staying away from even having to deal with those questions, I just stay within what I consider my pro-dom risk profile, right? These are the things I'm willing to offer for people. And then also, I mean, we do initial like Skype calls and stuff, so I get to vet people pretty heavily as well. So I mean, I have a lot of control over that too. Again, I'm very much about preemptively dodging conflict or having to make very difficult decisions. So I try, and sometimes that means that I have to say no to certain things or not do certain things. But to me, that's the best way to avoid those things or making wrong decisions, is try to stay away from areas that are going to cause you to have to make those decisions. So again, if you're someone, using the example of the video you were talking about, if you don't understand foot fetish or don't also get enjoyment from that, then maybe that's not a service you should offer.
Yeah, and I think beyond that as well, I mean, when it's something as perhaps impersonal as sending photos, it's a little bit different. But when you're interacting in a real life experience, I would suspect that most people will get a sense if you're not also enjoying it.
It comes off inauthentic.
Yeah, and that'll probably, at minimum, might not get you a repeat customer, because I think a lot of people do look for that authenticity. The whole back and forth of dominance and submission, of topping and bottoming, is about, if somebody doesn't really want to be in control, usually you can kind of suss that out, and it's not going to be pleasant for both of the people involved. And in terms of ethics, and you did mention pegging specifically as something that you don't go into because it's not part of your risk profile. Is that something you have to deal with pretty frequently when you have to turn people away from, things that they, I'll pay you money if you do this, and then having to kind of make that decision between the money and maybe doing something that might be pushing up against a boundary?
Yeah, we do have to remember, coming from the foundation of I was and I'm just going to use the term, I was a stripper for 6 years. I've had to say no to many situations like that before. So and this is actually something I've realized recently, where I looked back and was like, oh, all these random things that I've gone through in life or experienced, or jobs or struggles or roadblocks, lots of learnings that are really helpful right now. And, having had a very strong line in the sand when I was a stripper about what was in my risk profile for that situation, what I was going to do or not do for money, makes that easier now. I mean, it doesn't really matter how much money someone offers me for something. If it's not something I want to do, I will say no. And it's not necessarily because I don't need the money, but I'm just at that place in my life where my morals and character and conviction, and again, just wanting to live my life in, always in a happy, positive place, I just say no. And I can understand that's not necessarily easy for everyone. And again, I think that goes back to like your motivations for wanting to be a pro dom. If you're trying to get rich or you just want to make a bunch of money, similar even to being a stripper. I mean, I had to learn that when I was first doing that, where it's like, from the outside, you think, oh, you put all the makeup on and the hair and you put on a cute outfit and the heels, and then people just ask you for dances. No, have to sell ourselves like door to door salesmen to almost every single person that we get dances from. Like, the percentage of times when you're a dancer that people are just clamoring for you without you having to sell yourself at some point is very low. And so again, with pro doming, I think too, people go, oh, it's just, they look sexy and I put on some latex and I need a toy or two. And it's like, okay, but now that you've done all those things, what are you going to do when he's sitting in front of you and expecting you to fill up 2 hours of time of BDSM? So there's always more to the career in many aspects than, the glamorous side. I mean, same with like celebrities, we see this glamorous aspect and we don't see the day to day of no sleep or trying to get through an airport or trying to just get from here or there, and we don't see that struggle, and it's the same thing in these types of careers.
Yeah, yeah, and that actually reminds me of another point I wanted to make, which is like how you actually become a pro dom, in particular for people who aren't coming in with any kind of community background or skill set. Like, how do you actually go about learning the things you need to learn to do this safely? Do you reach out to people who are already in the field? Do you start out as a submissive and work your way up? Do you go to classes? Like, how do you actually go about doing that?
I mean, I would say everyone's journey is going to be different. I mean, ideally, you find another pro dom and you ask for what's the word for it?
A
Not
mentorship?
mentorship. Not a mentorship, more like an apprenticeship, right? So something where like you're probably going to be giving a lot of your free time where you are not being paid to some of it may just be like helping around the dungeon, sitting in on scenes, and I mean that's the key bit of learning that you're getting is that as someone's apprentice, they're going to give you show you what the laws are and how to run that business aspect, but then also show you how to throw floggers and how to do this. They're probably going to allow you to use their space. That is probably one of the most difficult aspects of doing this is finding a location. You don't want to scene out of your home. You just don't. You don't know these people well enough. You don't necessarily want to scene in hotels. It's just not ideal. You can. It's an extra cost. Again, I have some, because I was in the community, I have some connections. And again, I feel like if you're motivated to do these for the right reasons, there's no reason why you shouldn't be in the community or at least going to conventions and classes and things like that. If you're not able to find someone to apprentice under, and even if you are, to be honest. And I say that because finding someone to apprentice under is incredibly difficult. Most successful femdoms don't necessarily want to take on apprentice. A lot of them have been burned in their careers where they have taken someone on and they have not lived up to their time commitment or whatever the pro dom was expecting them to do, or they steal clients, or they get catty and just cause drama and problems, and that will cause doms to just be like, why would I exert my time, which I am not getting paid for, to grow you as a dom if you're not willing to put in the effort? And so then you have people that don't want to mentor, or don't want to do apprenticeships. And so I reached out to probably over 10 doms, femdoms. Some were pros, some were just, femdoms in the community. I didn't get a response from not one. And when I reached out to them, I mean, some of them I reached out and I was like, literally, I will clean your leather and scrub your toilets in your dungeon. I will do whatever you need me to do, bring you gifts every time I come over. I mean, those were the kind of messages I was sending. And this isn't to say anything negative about them, because again, I understand even in the short amount of time I've done it, I've had messages similar like that, not to the point of what I'm saying, what I had gone to be honest, but messages just asking for mentorship. And so I'm sure that these women get these messages all the time, and who can you tell is really dedicated and serious and who's not. So I don't judge them for not responding, but I didn't get a response, and I was adamant about trying to find a mentor, and I couldn't find one. And that is why really focused on watching people play when I went to events and doing hours and hours and hours of research about different topics and studying other pro doms pages. And I bought some of their clips so I could see how they scene. Like I had to find other resources because that just wasn't an option.
So that actually reminds me, from having needed to purchase clips to kind of see how pro doms do things. Is there anything that's different about the setup at all when you're doing something in a professional capacity versus in a personal capacity? Like how you actually like run the scene, I guess, like the in-scene communication or like what equipment you use or like even maybe kind of like are your safe word systems different or do you have like certain toys that you only use in like, professional settings versus for personal use?
You know, not really. I mean, I would say probably the biggest difference in play is that, my sessions are private. So my clients are normally naked. When I'm in the dungeon, I have to be honest, most of the time people I play with are not naked. Most of the time they go down to their underwear. Depends on the person. That's just our dungeon. And I also do a lot of rope suspension. So it's not always ideal to be 100% naked. Again, that would probably be the biggest difference is that there are some fetishes that I don't necessarily do in public at the dungeon that I do privately. And especially with my gentlemen, like our sessions at the dungeon are going to be different than our sessions when it's just the two of us. Yeah, as far as like the toys that I use, or I mean, even just my style of domination or the aspect, nothing really changes. That's kind of, I found that is kind of just blended into who I am. And so it kind of just natural all the time. And so it's not something I have to put on. And again, there's nothing wrong with that. There's a group I'm actually, one of the groups I'm working with is a mentoring for dominance program. And one of the first things we're going to do is kind of do, for lack of a better word, a vision board of what your dominant, kind of persona or personality would look like. And I mean, you can see in pop culture that women do this all the time. I mean, Beyonce has Sasha Fierce. Lady Gaga is her persona. It was for a while. I think Lady Gaga is now just became Lady Gaga. But, they kind of have a persona and they give that a name. And I think that depending on how your personality is, that's perfectly okay. Some people maybe a little bit more passive in their vanilla life, but are a scary dom in their kinky life. And so they have that switch, personality. I've naturally been dominant since my first toe was out of the womb. So it was just kind of me finding where that dominance fit into the world. And so I don't, it just kind of stays in that place all the time now, which is again why I said I wanted to be able to do it 24/7. So I didn't have to flip into another world when I'm in vanilla world, because men get very intimidated by my dominance in vanilla world.
Ah, okay. That reminds me. So I have two more questions I want to ask you, and I know we're kind of getting a little bit close on time, but the second to last question we'll say is there anything either in terms of a skill or an aspect of pro domination that you've found is like really important or vital to your work that most people maybe wouldn't expect to think of?
Yeah, and I think it crosses over with something that also people sometimes forget about in just the lifestyle as well, and is the work behind being a dominant that is not learning how to throw something or telling people what to do. It's the managing schedules and reading people's body language and knowing when your sub is saying everything's fine, but everything's not fine. Knowing when, I've had some clients that this is the first experience they've ever had in kink. So I have to set the pace of what they're doing because they do 2 needles and they're like, give me 40 needles. And I'm like, you're just high, like you're in subspace and this is brand new. You've never experienced this ever before in your life. And so I have to set the pace and go, we're not going that, slow down. It's okay. You've got time. And I think all those aspects that go into the psychology of DS dynamics and again, growing of your submissive and all of those things, I think is the aspect that people don't realize is really important. And a lot of what you do, it's more of what you do, to be honest, sometimes than the technical things. And again, just being able to read body language and know when someone can be pushed a little bit more and when someone's getting to the end. And I mean, again, so there's a lot of things I do as far as like just reading books on psychology and body language and things I was interested in again before I was even kinky, thank goodness. So I've had some foundation of learning of these things. But that's a lot of stuff I do to grow as a dominant, that besides practicing my whip throwing or tying or giving commands, like, it is growing myself and my personal abilities to interact with other beings in positive ways.
And an important thing to note for people who are maybe listening to this is all of these things are things you can learn without having to necessarily step into a dungeon either, which is great. Like if you can start working on those soft skills, like learning about human psychology and body language, how to act confident, these are all things that vanilla people oftentimes need in their lives too. So they're actually pretty easy to find resources on for people who are curious about learning more about dominance but maybe aren't ready yet to learn how to throw a flogger, or people maybe who know how to throw a flogger and maybe want to make that transition from being air quotes just a top to more of a lifestyle person, more of a dominant.
Yeah, and I mean, my some of my ultimate dom goals and fantasies are to be at a point where I don't need to throw a flogger. I've directed a dom who is submissive to me, who can throw the flogger on a submissive that is submissive to both of us, and I can just sit back and direct everything. Like, that's a true fetish of mine, is the director of everything. So I say that is because to me the ultimate goals are not are more mental dominance and like subtle dominance. One of the things me and my gentleman have recently started working on is signs and signals that I can give to him that other people don't necessarily notice. There's something to be said for, there's nothing wrong with that. I love to show off a sub for, a loud command that brings them running over on their knees, which is very lovely. But I really like something that no one notices, where they were like, wait, how did he even know to come over there? I didn't even notice there was a signal. So there's a lot of things about subtle dominance and mental dominance that long term I like more than even like tying and whips, which are my two favorite things. So that's saying a lot. At the end of the day, power exchange is my ultimate fetish, and so I really I like those aspects. And people tend to find too with my play, like outside of a scene, I could just talk to you for about kink for hours and just talk and talk and talk about it. When I'm in a scene, I don't like to talk. I'm not loud. I like to whisper sadistic things. But so there's a lot of aspects with that the way to develop those skills is are there's resources for those things, again, that are in vanilla life that aren't necessarily just tactical knowledge or skills.
My last question for you would be, is there anything else that we haven't brought up yet that you think is really important to know about the intersection between being a community member and being somebody who is also professional dominant?
Yeah, I think when doing both, and again, like many things that I talk about in the community, if you're coming from the right place, it will be easy, right? So one of the last videos I did on my channel was about how to start a FetLife group. And it's a two-part video, but the first part is about all the things you do before you start the group on FetLife, right? And I remind people throughout the video and in the second part that, like, if you're having conflict or struggles, if you come back to that place of why are we doing this, and that place is a good place, I'm started this group for leadership because someone asked me to do it because they see that I have the skills to do it, right? And I'm passionate about it and I want to share knowledge, or throw this party for the community or whatever else. If you're coming from a good space, then those ethical questions and those, how do I make this work with my lifestyle and they'll be easy because you're coming at it from a good place from the first part. And maybe I need to explain good place. I mean, being like, I use Brittany Simon's language with this because I just agree, just being a perfectly healthy, whole human. And not saying that we're not perfect, but always growing towards that, being aware of your flaws, looking in the mirror and seeing them and seeing how to work on them. That's my biggest advice for any dominant from the beginning. Before you even take on a submissive, I would really get to know yourself, because if you're not willing to admit and know your flaws, I feel like it's very hard to be a healthy dominant.
Yeah, I think that's really true. And honestly, like for anything in kink, like if you don't really know what you want yet, it's so easy to put yourself or put other people into unnecessarily dangerous and unhappy situations. So I think if that's everything for today, I would love to be able to tell people where they can find you and what your other social media is. So do you have anywhere where people can reach out to you or find more from you?
Yeah, so I have Instagram and Twitter and Facebook for both my pro dom stuff, which is just going to be at Madame Posh. And then if you would like to check out my YouTube channel stuff, that is under the MP, M as in Madam and P as in Posh experience, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. And if you're in the Dallas Fort Worth Metroplex, you can check out my FetLife page and see the events that I'm hosting and things going on at DFW Dungeon, where I work on the weekends.
All right, that's great. Thank you so much for being here and thank you for sharing your thoughts and experiences. It was great to be able to talk to you about this. If people have any comments or questions, they can either reach out at all of those places that we just listed, or you can leave a comment down below on this video. And again, thank you so much, Madame Posh, for being here.
Yes, real quick before you get off, Evie, I want to personally also thank you, because for listeners, Evie is a big foundation of my entire kink career lifestyle being where I am today. And I was very nervous about this interview because I have watched you for a long time and respected your opinion, and we've had conversations because I subscribe to your Patreon, and I just want to make sure that you understand that what you do is amazing for the community, and we appreciate it, and people are growing as people because of what you've put out there for us. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really glad that we were able to have this conversation, and hopefully, that's always my goal, is I want people to find the tools and the resources to be able to help themselves. And if I've done that in some way, that I will be able to go to sleep happily every night. All right. Again, thank you guys so much for listening. If you've made it this far, links to everything will be down in the description box, and I'll see y'all again very soon. Bye!
Bye, thanks.